I'm so happy to be here talking to you about your career and how to build a portfolio, a global portfolio. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? Okay, so yeah, I graduated from USD in 2006, so that seems like ages ago. It's about 13 years ago. And so feel free to ask questions, anytime, just raise your hand or just speak up. But I'm going to talk about how to build your portfolio and how to build your career, in essence, because I'm an HR practitioner. So feel free to ask me any questions that you want. So first of all, why did I add the word global, right? Because I could have just said building and advancing your career with your portfolio. So what we're seeing now is the industry practices is companies are going global, right? Companies are in multiple jurisdictions. So you go to a manufacturing company or a retail company, you can see that they're in multiple locations, multiple countries. So having that global experience and that global portfolio is definitely going to be an edge. You look at the world markets, the macroeconomics, politics, all of that combined into what does that mean in the workforce? That means that people have to have that global mindset, that global experience. That way they can have an edge. So that's why I added the word global in it. So before I go into the steps on building and advancing, let's talk about some of the general things that would be very helpful. If I think back to, when I started my career, this is long ago, probably before you were born. I've been in HR for 30 years, so definitely before you were born. The first thing is identify your goal. So if you were to close your eyes and picture yourself 10 years from now, what would that look like? Would it be you're in a particular industry, you're in a particular field, maybe you're not sure about the field, but maybe I want to be in technology, or I want to be in software, or I want to be in retail, I want to work for Nike, or whoever, right? So what is your goal? What is your 10-year goal and your 5-year goal, right? Because you're going to back into your 10-year using your 5-year goal. The second thing, I think this is great for a group like this, and I know that you have a mentoring program at USD, right? So talk to others, talk to other people that are experts in the field, and just say, hey, how did you get started in your career? How did you start your journey? What are the things that was helpful for you when you started your work? And have that learning on talking to the experts. And this is a great time, right? Because you're in school, you can have, when people come in, when the career development people are bringing speakers in, that's your opportunity to talk to experts or go out and link into people and get connected. The third one that's gonna be very important, and I see some people miss this part, which is a very important part, is have a strategy. So if you think about your career and you think about your 10-year career, 10 years sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. If you think about your 10-year career and you back into your 5-year career, then you can say, well, what are the pieces that I need in order to get to that 5-year career? So I'll give you an example to make it real. So let's say you wanted to be in HR. Anybody here want to be in HR? Oh, okay, we have a few. It's a great profession, by the way. So let's say you want to be in HR and you want to say, hey, in 5 years, I would like to be a senior manager in HR. So you can say, okay, well, in HR, there are multiple disciplines. Do you want to be in recruiting? Do you want to be in learning? Do you want to be a business partner? Do you want to be in compensation? Do you want to be in benefits? So you have a strategy on where you're going to concentrate. What area are you really going to tackle? And every profession has that. So do your research, understand what is the strategy in order to get to that place, and what are the different nuggets that you can do to build your portfolio. The fourth one that's very important, I think, is understanding yourself. So, maybe your mom says, hey, it'd be great if you become a lawyer. That's what my mom told me. Hey, it'd be great if you're a lawyer. And I'm like, I don't really want to be a lawyer. But so what is it that you want to do? Do you want to be in business? Do you want to be in, what profession? So understanding as well your strengths, right? So if you look at the very successful people, and if you look back at why they're successful and what is the journey that made them successful, usually there's two things that are very important. One is they're good at what they do, and two is they really like what they do. So those are the two main components, right? So understanding yourself would be a key to understanding what strategy, what industry, and how you want to get to your goal. And finally is build a great resume. So tap into the vast network that USD has in career counseling. Build a great resume that will stand out. So how many of you are in undergrad? Okay, many of you. So you do remember how you got into USD and how you had to fill out your application form, right? And you probably had some counseling and somebody said, hey, we need the wow effect. Make yourself stand out, right? There's, how many thousands of applicants to USD. USD is very, very competitive. So how did you make your resume stand out, your application stand out? It's exactly the same thing with a resume. So how are you going to make yourself stand out? I get thousands of resumes every day. So we have a platform, it's called Workday. So people apply via Workday. So we get a lot of applications. So, and I look at them sometimes, I'll look at a few, and there are some things that I would look at and I'll be like, wow, this is a great background. This is a great experience. So I'm going to talk about what that means from a practical standpoint. But so build a great resume is really important. How to make it stand out, and like people will say, what is the wow effect of your resume? So any questions on that before we go into the details on how to build your portfolio? Okay, everyone okay? Having your lunch? All right, so we're gonna talk about the 4 C's. And this is sort of like, this is my toolkit when I'm developing new talent or emerging talent, as we call it. This is what we use to build their portfolio. So the first one is create capacity. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Can someone tell me what it means to create capacity? I'm sure there's one person. Anybody?
Right in the back. Maybe an intellectual capacity or the ability to complete projects.
Mm-hmm. Execute, that's right. The ability to execute, and sometimes multiple things, right? Did you have another thought?
I was just going to say maybe actually to create the time and the space.
Time and space.
To the energy and effort and passion towards it.
Absolutely, yeah. So I put a few nuggets there for create capacity, right? But I'm going to use this example. It's a very simple example, but it resonates with me because every time I tell people this is an example, they say, oh yeah, I get it. So how many of you know how to write a macro? Because I don't. But do you guys know how to write a macro? So it's not easy, right? It's actually, it's a skill. So if I say to person A who doesn't know how to write a macro, I say, hey, can you figure out how to write this macro and make sure that this model works? And they're gonna look at me like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? So it's gonna take them probably a few weeks, maybe months, to figure out how to do the macro. And then person B here, on the other hand, knows how to write a macro. And I say, hey, this project needs a macro. Can you write it? Can you model it? And they're like, oh yeah, give it to you in 2 days. That's capacity, right? That's creating capacity. So in order to create capacity, you need skills. And if how you get skills is you go and learn, right? And how you get skills, that second bullet there is learn and practice. The more you practice, the better you're at it. And the better you're at it, the more your capacity is. So one other example is you're writing a paper. So you've written many papers in your academic career, right? I'm sure of it. So, when you start writing a paper, it may take you 3 hours to write a paper, right? If you really focus on it, it's going to take you 3 hours. But if you've never written a paper before and you don't even know what's an API, what's the style, how do you do footnotes, it's going to take you a lot longer to write that paper. So when you build your capacity, you're in effect building your effectiveness and how fast you can do things, how you can do multiple things at the same time. So that means enhancing your knowledge, right? So learning, practicing, enhancing your knowledge. This is a lot where school comes in. You have the knowledge and you practice it and you experiment, right? So sometimes it's okay to fail. Like we always say, practice and fail fast because then you can move on. There's nothing wrong with failing fast. And you want to be agile. You want to be agile by learning. So you fail fast, you learn, and you move on. And that time and space that you talked about is really important. So people always say, I talk to some people and I say, hey, did you get a chance to learn that thing? Oh, no, I'm too busy. I don't have time for that, right? Everyone's too busy, right? There's really not enough time in the day anyway. You think about you go to school, you got to go to the gym, you got to do your laundry, you got to do all that. What time do you have left to do what you want? But you have to find a way to create time and space to devote into the things that are important for your learning. So I have a son in college as well. So we have this conversation all the time. And I'm like, what you doing? He's like, I'm going to the gym. And I'm like, well, did you do this and that? No, I don't have time. I'm like, well, so I do this speech with him. Can you please create time and space to do what's important, to learn and practice what you're learning? So that is really, really important, creating capacity. The next one is growing your capability, okay? So this is really, are you capable of doing that? And that also comes with practice. A lot of this you can do with what the USD education is affording you, right? The tools to grow your capability. So how about if you have a part-time job? How about if you go to an internship? You go to your study abroad. So if you think about the global landscape, how many of you have done a study away program? Okay, a lot, actually. Yeah, I think USD is one of the best in the study away programs, right? So think about your time in your study away. What did you learn from that experience? Maybe you were there for a semester. Did you immerse yourself in that culture? Did you learn what it is to be in that country, in that place, in that city? And what can you bring back to your portfolio? So in your resume, you can say, oh, I was in, pick a place. I was in Sydney, and I learned all these things about the culture of Sydney. I learned about, the do's and don'ts of that culture. And you can bring that back into your capability portfolio. You did a project. You completed a project, or you did field work. So all of those little nuggets help in building your global resume, your global portfolio. So I would really suggest if you're thinking about doing an internship, I know it takes away time from doing all the other things, but internships is a great way to grow your capability because you're in the real world and you're really working at a company and growing all those, being agile and learning from your mistakes. In my opinion, that is the best way, is to have an internship or a job or doing project work. So maybe some of you might say, I really don't have an opportunity to do internships because I'm taking summer classes. I think that's also very possible. So what I would say is you have to be creative and you have to think about, well, is there other things that you can do that goes to the next one, which is community? What are you doing in order to build your connection to your community? So that's also very important in building your global portfolio. Is, maybe you're not doing an internship, but maybe you can do volunteer work, right? So there's a lot of organizations that ask for volunteers to travel, to go to a different country, to help out. And that's another way you can learn and build your global portfolio. So what you're learning, right, in the real world is, out of the confines of school is, number one, how do you get things done? How do you interact with people? Developing your interpersonal skills, developing your judgment, right? When you have multiple decision points that you're doing, how are you making the decision A versus B, right? So those are the things that you really learn from a real life, field work or experience. And I want to focus on community a little bit. So when we look at a resume, when I look at a resume, I like to see that someone is engaged, right? Engaged in their community. So yes, you have your classwork, you have your all other miscellaneous things, but what are you doing from a social responsibility standpoint? Are you giving back to your community? Are you doing something over and above your classroom work? Right? Because I will tell you, there's lots of other people that are doing exactly that. So if you remember what I talked about in the first slide, which is how do you build a wow resume? So if you say, oh, I volunteered with the United Nations and I went to, what country, and this is the project that we did, and this was the outcome that we did, and this is the impact in the community, I'm looking at your resume and I'm like, wow, when can you start? Right? And then the other resume doesn't have that, right? It has like, here's my GPA, here's my classwork, and that's kind of it, because I didn't have time and space for anything else. And it's still USD, it's still really good. But compared to the other resume, I'm like, well, let me look at the other resume closely, because can we make a call right now and get that person in? Because I want to meet them face to face, right? So think about that in the context of how do you grow your portfolio if you don't have an opportunity to work yet, if you're too busy for an internship, like a year-round internship, maybe you can do something in the summer and grow your portfolio and go visit other places and make an impact. This grow your network is really, really important. So how many of you are in any type of social media? Everybody probably, right? So there's lots of them. Obviously, the one that's very professional, very popular is LinkedIn. So grow your network, not just in social, but in real life, right? So this is where you can join clubs, you can join networks, you can go do, let's say, a women's network or engineering network or a business network, because this is how you will broaden your connections. Many times, someone might say, hey, Grace, can you take a look at this resume? And I'm like, who is this person? And the person might say, oh, I met them at a network and I was really impressed with them. So take a look at the resume. And I'll look at the resume and I'm like, wow, this is really impressive. And I call them and get them in. So networking is really critical because you're building all those connections and you're learning from your connections, right? It's not just for social gathering, but you're also learning from their experiences and getting real life connections and advice on your career. So be engaged. that's if you think about it, right? If you think about, you just ask yourself the question, am I engaged in my community? Am I engaged with my school? In San Diego is so beautiful. There's so many things to do. So ask yourself the question, are you engaged? And if the answer is no, then if you want to be more engaged, you could probably put a list together of things that will help you be more engaged, right? So the notion here is get out of your comfort zone and get out there and stay connected and do something that's not your norm, right? Because on your resume, you can talk about the experiences that you've had, the global experiences. You know, if you traveled abroad, you lived somewhere else, you did a global project. One of the things that I think San Diego has to offer is there's many, many multinational companies here. And so Cubic, as an example, we have, this past summer, we had about 100 interns at Cubic from all over the, some of them are outside of the country, so all over the world. And so try to find one of those connections, right? It's one of those opportunities for you to grow your network and grow your skill. And basically, you're creating your capacity, you're growing your capability, and you're empowering your community. Any thoughts so far before I go to the fourth C? Is this resonating, or you're like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about, Grace? Is it making sense? Like, this is something you can do to advance your career, to stand out, right? That's the whole essence, is thousands of people are looking for a job, even if unemployment is fairly low, but there's still a lot of competition out there. So your goal is to make yourself stand out from the crowd.
What about charity, like donating charity?
That's great. Yeah, I would call that volunteerism.
Putting that on the resume?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
What about something like, for instance, myself, I don't go through organizations, so I'll make like food and stuff like that, and I'll actually go and hand it out downtown to the homeless. Would you want something, or you wanted something more organizational?
No, you could do that. Yeah. But make sure you can back it up if somebody wants to pressure test it, right?
Okay.
But yeah, definitely.
Right.
Okay, so maybe we'll have more discussion at the end. The last one, and this is really important, is boosting your credibility. So you may not be thinking about credibility at this time because you're in your undergrad, maybe you're a freshman, you're a sophomore, but credibility is really important in the marketplace. So what do I mean by boosting your credibility? The first one is your brand. So I'm a close your eyes person. So close your eyes and visualize, what is your personal brand? If I had 2 minutes to describe you with a stranger in an elevator, what would I say about you? Right? So you write that, and then you make it happen. And then you create your strategy to make that happen. So what is your personal brand? That's your homework, really, if you haven't thought about it already. So, when I first started working in HR, this is 30 years ago, I didn't think about having a brand, to be honest. I'm just happy to have a job. But as I grew, older and wiser, hopefully, I started to think about, what is my brand? And so if I look back now and I say, Grace Lee, your HR, your diversity officer, what is my brand? I think about my brand as I'm a very innovative HR practitioner that has a lot of knowledge in the global, because I've lived in 7 countries. That's the other thing. You want to try to build, how many places have you been to? How many places have you traveled? How many places have you lived? So I have lived in Taipei, Hong Kong, China, Japan, Manila, the UK, and the US. So that's part of my brand, right? So I've lived in many countries. I speak 4 languages, so that's part of my brand. So every little nugget that you have to building your brand is how you visualize yourself. So how do you build your portfolio is basically what is the brand. So if I read your resume, am I going to say, this is your brand? I can actually tell if someone have put some thought into their resume, because when I read their resume, I'm going to say, this person knows what their brand is, because every string of their resume relates to that brand. So it's a sort of, if you have a marketing class, I'm sure you do, you'll think about branding. So what's your personal brand? Does that make sense? Your say-do ratio. So hopefully that's 100%. You do 100% of what you say you're going to do. It's probably not very easy, but this word goes around, right? Even from your professors, even from people at school, your friends, word gets around. It's like, hey, sorry, what's your name?
Ruben.
Ruben. Wow, Ruben's say-do ratio is so high. If he says something, he will do it, right? Because at the end of the day, companies want people who are dependable, right? We want to hire people we can count on, that they're not going to be just like, I don't care about that project. I'm sick. I'm not well. I'm going surfing, right? So your say-do ratio is really important, and that's part of your brand. That's part of your brand. Immerse in culture. Oh my God, this is my favorite topic, one of my favorite topics. So when you go to, let's think of a place that's far away. If you go to South Africa, have you been to South Africa? Anyone? I've never been. But if you've been to South Africa, are you going to eat their food, or are you going to look for McDonald's? Sorry, McDonald's. Hopefully you're not doing McDonald's, right? So please immerse in the culture and learn from that. Are you going to stay in your hotel room all the time? Or are you going to be more adventurous and venture out and take public transportation, of course, in a safe way, and learn everything there is to learn about their culture, right? So this is where I actually love places like Airbnb, because in a hotel, we go abroad, we look for Hilton, Marriott, right? It's the usual suspects. And you get the same experience, right? The food you're going to get, the bed you're going to get, the pillow you're going to get, the closet, the bathroom, everything is the same, right? Because it's like a track home, everything is the same. But what if you go and do, a VRBO or an Airbnb, you're getting the authentic experience, right? And that's how you immerse in culture. And you can have stories to tell, right? Storytelling is very powerful. And when you're in an interview, you can actually share that story. You can say, when I was in South Africa, it was my first time eating this particular food. And it was my first time doing this particular activity or this particular ride. And what that tells us is that you have the courage to experiment, right? That's what that tells me. It's like you can go out of your comfort zone and try new things. So please, no McDonald's. Hopefully I don't get in trouble by saying that. Mastery, okay? So mastery is really important in building your global portfolio. So it takes time to be a master. There's a book actually, right, that talks about how many times you have to do something before you can call yourself a master. But have a master of something, right? Something you're really good at. And you can talk about that. It could be, I am a master at juggling 2 things, 5 things, 10 things. I'm a master of multitasking. You can talk about that. Or I'm a master in Excel. I can do macros in a day, right? Which for me, it'll take me a year and I still can't figure it out. But what is your mastery, right? So what can you claim, your claim to fame, so to speak? And that's part of your brand as well, okay? So how do you build your brand? The social infrastructure, right? So get out of your comfort zone and network with people. So when I was earlier in my career, I get invited to, so first of all, I'm a first generation immigrant, right? So I wasn't born in the US. I came to the US in 1991. And my English was pretty bad, so I was like trying to learn the culture, learn the country, and learn the language at the same time. And so when I was trying to, advance in my career and network, I was kind of really timid, right? I was not out there. I couldn't put myself out there in like really uncomfortable situations because, it was uncomfortable. But you may be facing that sometimes in an uncomfortable situation, and I would encourage you to do it anyway. Get a buddy, right? So you have a friend, you have a buddy, you can say, hey, let's try this thing together. It's like learning how to, learning how to surf, right? If you don't know how to surf, it may look like pretty daunting. But if you have a buddy, maybe it's a little bit more fun to try something. So when you're building your network, you're trying to go into different clubs, different networking groups. It will help if you have a buddy or a friend to go with. So to me, these are the main essence. And if you sprinkle global into everything, that's how you really build your global portfolio. So when we look at candidates right now, so we're a transportation and defense company, so we hire a lot of business people, we hire a lot of engineers, we hire a lot of project managers. So when we get resumes in, the HR team will take a look at the resumes and we'll look for things that are standing out, right? So have they had any global work? It could be one project. It doesn't have to be a lot. Have they gone out of their comfort zone? Have they tried to master a particular skill? Are they embedded in their community? Do they do something that's more than 100%, right? So it's that extra effort. It's that discretionary effort that you have. So do you have a brand? When I look at your resume, I'm seeing all those things. How many here of you do not have a resume yet? All of you have a resume. Okay, that's great. So take a look at your resume and then put some checkpoints, checklists to say, have someone else read it and say, okay, when you read it, can you tell what my brand is? If the answer is no, then redo your resume. When you read my resume, can you tell what I'm really good at, right? So one of the things that people do in resumes is they put their tasks. Like, I did this, I did this. I ran in a 5K. I did, but they don't give you any outcomes, right? So what I like to always advise people is put outcomes in your resume. So maybe you say, I volunteered to give food and it affected, I helped 100 people in my community, right? So there's an outcome attached to your task. So think about those things and think about how can you, as a person, your personal development, how can you build your 4 C's? How can you create more capacity? That means learning new things that are not comfortable, practicing what you know, experimenting, fail fast, move on, learning about what you're good at, learning about what you're not good at, and putting a development plan to address those things. Growing your capability, do different things, project work, field work, research, and be engaged in your community. I cannot underscore the importance of community involvement because this is what makes you stand out. And work on your credibility, your personal brand, your say-do ratio, your profile. If I look at it, I can be like, wow, I really want to hire this person. And you can look at companies that are multinational companies that can help you attain that experience, that global experience.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.